Thank you. The final item of business this evening is a members' business debate on motion 17186 in the name of Megan Gallagher on Best Start New Model of Neonatal Care. This debate will be concluded without any questions being put, and I would just advise members to note that Jackie Bailey has lodged an amendment to this motion. Amendments to members' business motions are admissible but are not taken in the chamber. I would invite those members who would wish to speak in debate. Please press the request to speak buttons, and I call on Megan Gallagher to open the debate. Up to 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And before I begin my remarks this evening, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the team at Bliss Scotland for working with me to present this motion to Parliament. I first raised issues surrounding the Best Start new model of neonatal care back in September 2023. News had broken about the intention to downgrade Wishaw General Hospital's neonatal department in my region. This provoked a strong backlash from communities in Lanarkshire, especially from families who had received care and support from the award-winning team at the hospital. A campaign group led by the Wishaw Neonatal Warriors have said that the plans would be catastrophic, as expectant mums and their babies will need to travel to other hospitals to receive specialised care. The online petition has now surpassed 25,000 signatures, a testimony of the strength of feeling against this ill-thought-out decision. I did warn the Minister at the time that Lanarkshire mums are the feisty type, and I know that they will continue to fight against the downgrade every step of the way. They will continue, of course, to have my support, as I do not believe that government ministers have truly considered the lasting impact this will have on parents and their newborn babies, nor, of course, do they have the adequate or sustained staffing levels to achieve this new model of neonatal care. The Best Start model, of course, was first introduced in 2017. Yet, 8 years on, the new model has not been fully implemented, and the resources needed to do this safely while providing support to families has not been delivered in full. There remains great uncertainty over when or how full implementation of the neonatal model, confirmed by the Minister in July 2023, will take place. And that's simply not good enough. 1 in 7 babies in the UK require some level of neonatal care after birth, and the care they receive is vital to their long-term health. Around 5,200 babies a year are admitted to neonatal units in Scotland. The care they receive is often life-saving, but it can also be deeply traumatic for babies and their families. Babies, of course, who have just opened their eyes for the first time are not only adapting to their new surroundings, but are exposed to stress and pain from requiring additional care. One of the main issues I wish to raise today, Presiding Officer, is that of facilities for parents. I have just referenced how deeply traumatising neonatal care is for parents and babies. Yet moments after giving birth, mums are routinely separated from their babies for extended periods, as most hospitals do not provide sufficient facilities for parents to stay overnight. This is undoubtedly detrimental to the health of not just the newborn baby, but also worried parents who just want to be close so they can comfort their child. The lack of this early contact can disrupt bonding, it can heighten stress, and the impact both of emotional well-being and physical development, such as breastfeeding initiation. So why do we not have overnight accommodation for parents on neonatal wards? Parents travelling long distances to be with their baby in a hospital overnight is not an easy task, especially if there's more than one child involved. Bliss Families Kept Apart in Scotland campaign found that for 1 in every 10 babies that need to stay overnight on a unit, there is only one room for a parent to stay with them. In 2025, that is scandalous. Alternative arrangements are considered, but this usually comes at a cost to parents who might not be able to afford to stay in a nearby hotel. There appears to be no solutions in place to provide parents with that reassurance that they will be able to stay by their newborn's side. Regardless of whether the Scottish Government continues with what I feel is the wrong move of downgrading neonatal departments across Scotland, They must ensure that there is overnight accommodation for parents to stay with their babies. Otherwise, this government is willingly advocating for the sickest newborn babies to be separated from their parents. That would be morally wrong, but also unforgivable should any parent learn of a deterioration of their baby's health without being close by. Therefore, I am calling on the Minister to commit today that she will ensure that every hospital currently specialising in neonatal care has the appropriate accommodation for parents. This is essential for any new model of neonatal care, and I cannot believe that we are even having this discussion today. It's basic common sense. Presiding Officer, the implementation of the recommendations of the Best Start model for neonatal care has been painfully slow. Despite not agreeing with all recommendations, families who may be affected in the future, or critically for the staff working in the neonatal services departments across Scotland, deserve to know how long this new model will take to implement. If the Scottish Government is truly committed to providing high-quality care to the sickest babies, they need to get a move on. But ministers cannot continue, of course, to bury their heads in the sand over the downgrading of neonatal services. Regardless of whatever evidence that they said that has been produced, it's clear that communities are against this move, and they have ignored the fact that receiving care further from home can reduce parents' ability to be partners in their baby's care. They also can't overlook the need to ensure that overnight accommodation is provided to parents so they can always be with their babies. The Minister must set out what it sees as essential criteria in the Best Start model, including adequate staffing provision and what the timescale for full implementation will be. Uncertainty causes alarm, and this will be an opportunity for the Scottish Government to outline those next steps today. Presiding Officer, I said during my last contribution on this topic that the reason I feel so passionately about this issue is because I am a mum, and I will continue to push this Scottish Government to improve neonatal services right across Scotland. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Gallagher. We now move to the open debate. I call Claire Adamson, who is joining us remotely, to be followed by Ros McCall. Ms Adamson.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. The birth of a new baby is one of the most exciting times in a family. There's nothing more precious than the birth of a baby, and concerns and safety around this time for parents and families is huge. As a mother and a step-grandmum, I understand these concerns only too well. And I share the concerns of my constituents in this regards. But for people who have had to go through the most difficult experience of preterm birth, when your hope is all about celebrating a new family member, it must be heartbreaking and one I can only imagine in terms of stress and worry. I am very proud of the record of the team at the neonatal unit in University Hospital Wishaw in my constituency. The care and support offered during an acutely difficult and uncertain time is invaluable to families. So I know why this issue brings up such strong feelings and can be emotive. But we have a responsibility not to add fire to that anxiety. We all want the best outcomes for constituents and for new families at an uncertain time. And I say that without doubt of any of my colleagues, whatever their party affiliation, we all want the best for our constituents. But as policymakers, we have to be guided by the evidence. We can't ignore the clinical expertise, and neither can or should the Scottish Government. I want to agree with many of the points that were raised by Megan Gallagher, and I know her commitment to this area, and agree with the substantive points about implementation and assurance and certainty about the way forward. And we all want a new model of care to have the very best standards. Driven by clinical recommendations which seek the best life chances for all babies, including the best chances for the sickest babies and those predicted to be early preterm births. The clinical analysis we have all been presented with shows that the best outcomes for this small number of very premature babies delivered in units is best delivered in units who regularly see the most complex cases and have ready access to the specialist supportive services. The new model must be underpinned by adequate and sustainable funding without a doubt, as must all of our public health services. Providing reassurance to new parents is critical. In respect of overnight accommodation and in respect of access to specialist support and in respect of certainty that they will receive the best possible care. All of that is crucial to making a success of the new national model. Best Start report did happen in 2017 and recommended a new model of neonatal care based on the British Association of Perinatal Medicine definitions and levels of care. It proposed moving from the current model of 8 neonatal intensive care units to a model of 3 units, supported by the continuation of the current units. And I think that's really important. The 3 specialist intensive care units are to be supported by the current neonatal units, including that one in Wishaw. It's a redesign of the system, and Wishaw will be designated as a local neonatal unit, still providing care for neonatal babies. The 3 proposed NICUs in Edinburgh, Glasgow and Aberdeen are the units which have already conducted specialist services, including neonatal surgery, which is not available at Wishaw. It does not have the capacity nor the expertise to facilitate neonatal surgery. And this redesign of services will not affect the vast majorities of babies attending Wishaw in the local prenatal unit. An example for Wishaw, the changes have been said to apply to a tiny minority, 1 or 2 babies per month, who are most at risk and whose survival chances would be improved in one of the 3 specialist units. All local neonatal units across Scotland will continue to provide this care for babies that are born at greater than 27 weeks. The options appraisal happened in 2023, and the recommendations for the new neonatal model of care are underpinned by strong evidence that population outcomes for the most premature and sickest babies are improved by delivery and care of units looking after a critical mass of these babies. The intention with the new model of care is that mothers suspected of an extreme preterm labour will be transferred before labour and before preferably giving birth to the maternity units at the hospitals that have this intensive care expertise. And this allows mother and baby to receive that best care. Practically, we know this will not always be possible, and certainly reassurances for other cases is vital. And in the circumstances where this hasn't happened, a specialist neonatal transport and
Ms Adamson, I would ask you if you could bring your remarks to a close, please, because you're quite a wee bit over your time. Thanks very much.
Oh, and my apologies, Presiding Officer. I want to thank the people who work in the Wishaw neonatal unit, and I look forward to hearing the response to the queries already raised by myself and Ms Gallagher from the Minister. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Ms Adamson. I now call Rose McCall to be followed by Jackie Bailey. Ms McCall.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I'm happy to speak on this important topic, and I want to start by congratulating my colleague Megan Gallagher for securing the debate in Chamber today. What can be more important to a country than providing the best start in life for all children? I cannot imagine the fear and anxiety that any parent will experience when they find out their baby will be delivered before the due date and will need specialist neonatal care to help them thrive and unfortunately survive. But that's the case for 1 in 7 babies born in the UK, meaning that approximately 5,200 babies are admitted to neonatal units in Scotland every year. Over 5,000 families are facing the worst circumstances they can imagine with their newly born baby. You put all your trust and hopes in the skills of the highly trained staff, knowing that you're in no position to provide the levels of care needed. Your beautiful new baby is suffering and there's nothing you can do about that. And the feeling of helplessness must be overwhelming. This is a situation I've not had to realise, but I think we can all empathise with the panic and stress that must come from it. That's why the review of the Best Start New model of neonatal care was published back in 2017, and that was reaffirmed by the Minister in 2023. Now, we may have concerns over the downgrading of some of the neonatal units, but we're halfway through 2025, and there's still so much more that needs to be done, with staffing levels and accommodation for parents still needing intense focus. I want to thank Bliss Scotland for giving me sight of their briefing for today's debate. And it was really worrying to read that there's an 88% shortfall in Scotland between AHPPP staffing levels for units, and those staffing levels that should be achieved. This is a 20% worse than the UK average, and I hope that the Minister will address this particular issue in her remarks. Accommodation is another worrying statistic in the briefing, as it highlights that for every 10 babies needing to stay overnight in the unit, there's only one room for a parent to stay with them. This means that parents are routinely separated overnight from their newborn, enduring a time in neonatal care. And Deputy Presiding Officer, the stress that I mentioned in my opening remarks can only be heightened when distances and lack of family support is factored into the emotional mix. The cost involved will be prohibitive, with accommodation, food and travel costs all having to be found, especially as funding for this, although welcome, is a cumbersome process. I hope the Minister will take on board the recommendations from the Bliss briefing, not only to address the staffing and residential shortfalls, but provide the much-needed timetable for the implementation of the agreed neonatal model. So, in conclusion, the work done so far as it goes, as much as we may have a concern as the part of it which is the wrong direction of downgrading, and stress the urgency to move forward with staffing and accommodation at pace. For every child that deserves to have the best start in neonatal care, we in this place should ensure the correct staffing labels to guarantee that is done. For every parent having to deal with the emotional stress that they should be rejoicing in the birth of their beautiful child, we in this place should minimise the additional factors as much as possible. And for every family facing this situation, we in this place should ensure clarity and commitment on the future. It's the very least we can do. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms McCall. I now call Jackie Bailey to be followed by Tess White. Ms Bailey.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And can I start by thanking Megan Gallagher for bringing this motion to the Chamber, and indeed I commend her for her speech. The Labour amendment is not to take away from any part of her motion, but to enhance it by talking about Wishaw Neonatal, which she has addressed herself. When you have a child in neonatal intensive care, you don't know what to expect. The family could be called in at any minute to say goodbye. What happens if their child is 200 miles away? These were the words of Lynn McRitchie, whose newborn son, Innes, spent 4 months in Wishaw's neonatal unit, fighting off infections and sepsis. In those first anxious days, Lynn was told Innes could die at any moment. Innes is now 6 years old, and Lynn is one of the Wishaw warriors raising her voice in concern at the SNP's plan to downgrade the neonatal unit that saved her baby's life. A decision opposed by everybody, from clinical staff and local communities to the former SNP Health Secretary, Alex Neil. A thoughtless centralisation of neonatal care that means the sickest babies could be transferred to Aberdeen, a 3-hour journey away, because there is insufficient capacity at Glasgow and Edinburgh. The SNP government says it's following expert advice. So let me remind the Minister what the Best Start report actually said. 3 to 5 neonatal intensive care units should be developed, supported by 10 to 12 local neonatal and special care units. 5 neonatal intensive care units could easily include NHS Lanarkshire, Scotland's 3rd largest health board. It could easily include the neonatal multidisciplinary team at University Hospital Wishaw that was named the UK Neonatal Team of 2023. So why did the SNP government interpret the Best Start recommendation as narrowly as possible and stop at 3 specialist units? The Best Start proposals offered a vision where mothers and babies received truly family-centred and compassionate care, and noted the benefits of keeping mothers and babies together, as Megan Gallagher did in her speech. To quote Lynn again, they talk about keeping families together, but parents have not been consulted on these plans. Mums and babies should not be separated, and if there is not enough accommodation at these hospitals, then that is exactly what will happen. Parents would have to stay in hotels, mums are often discharged before a baby, and if there is nowhere for them to stay, what will they do? The Best Start report pledged to design services using the best available evidence, but NHS Lanarkshire was not actually represented in the options appraisal process. Nor did the decision makers use data from the existing neonatal unit in Wishaw. They didn't take account of the existing skills and knowledge in Wishaw, nor did they acknowledge the comparatively high number of premature babies being delivered in Lanarkshire. The evidence for this devastating decision is therefore shaky at best, Presiding Officer, while those to whom it matters most feel left in the dark. Monica Sheen is another Lanarkshire mum. On multiple occasions, she got the call every parent dreads, to come to the hospital to say goodbye to her premature son, Alfie. She described the 5-minute journey to the hospital as the longest of your life, and said, "I can't imagine what a 3-hour journey to say goodbye would be like." Thankfully, Alfie pulled through. But local people, clinical workers and families are all clear. The facility must be protected for the babies of the future. So will the Minister scrap the proposed downgrading of the neonatal intensive care unit at University Hospital Wishaw? This is in the Cabinet Secretary's backyard. Will he do anything at all, to protect the interests of vulnerable babies and their parents across Lanarkshire? And if not, how will the SNP government ensure that mums and babies like Monica and Alfie can stay together at the most frightening time of their lives?
Thank you, Ms Bailey. And I now call Tess White.
Presiding Officer, I also thank my colleague Megan Gallagher for securing the parliamentary time for such an important topic. The centralisation of neonatal intensive care is causing massive concern amongst clinicians. Families have said it could be catastrophic. There has been strong criticism of the arbitrary scoring mechanism, and it means that at the most vulnerable point in their lives, new parents to premature and seriously ill babies could, as we've heard today, have to travel miles to visit them. And in such difficult circumstances, one parent tragically said, "You don't know what to expect. The family could be called in at any minute to say goodbye." Imagine having to travel hours to Aberdeen, Edinburgh or Glasgow to do so. I pay tribute to campaigners who are fighting to stop the downgrading of existing facilities. The service at Ninewells in Dundee, in my region, is one of them. For more than 50 years, Ninewells has had a first-class alongside midwifery unit, or AMU, with neonatal intensive care as part of that offering. It was refurbished in 1999. What the AMU means is that mums have the safety net and a psychological boost of having access to an obstetric labour suite, specialists and equipment almost at the bedside. The Dundee midwifery unit is separate from the obstetric consultant unit, but still within the hospital, allowing for easy access to medical support if needed. But for years, we've seen a centralisation of maternity services in Tayside. When Fife Jameson Maternity Hospital closed in Forfar in 1993, it was to be replaced by midwifery at the new White Hills Health Centre. This didn't last long before it closed and sent mums to Montrose or Arbroath. When Montrose Community Midwife Unit shut in 2016 because of lack of staff, it was for 3 months. 3 months. But it never reopened. A new maternity unit planned for 2 decades was shelved in 2013. CMU was centralised to Arbroath, and I'm told the standard of care is second to none. But the building it is based in is itself more than a century old, and there's little hope of it being replaced. Why is this relevant to Ninewells? When previous closures have taken place in Angus, it has been with the facility at Ninewells in the background, a safety net for the most difficult births in the community. Like many of the Tayside centralised services, specialism has come at the cost of long drives, bus journeys, ambulance trips, or plain old inaccessibility if you don't have a car. If Ninewells loses its top status for NIC, it could lead to an insane situation where mums living in Dundee with sick babies will be sent 66 miles via the A90 to Aberdeen. And that means, as most of us know and most constituents know, and mums and fathers know, navigating the Forfar Road and half of the Kingsway, which is often at a standstill for hours of the day. Surely, resourcing NHS Tayside is the best outcome, focusing on recruitment and retention, rather than the erosion of healthcare. Finally, Presiding Officer, if even one tragedy can be averted by having a full local NICU, then why take the risk? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms White. I now call on Minister Jenny Minto to respond to the debate. Up to 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and thank you too to members who have taken part in the debate. I too, like others have, thank Megan Gallagher for bringing this motion to the Chamber, and note that my door is always open for her to meet with me. Today's discussion provides me with the opportunity to update Parliament on the progress towards implementing the new model of neonatal care. Firstly, I would like to commend, as others have, the 15 incredible neonatal units we have in Scotland who provide and will continue to provide invaluable care for the babies who require neonatal care. In each of the units I have visited, I have been hugely impressed by the dedication of staff and the support they provide for families in these most difficult times. The parents' stories of the care and compassion they have received from staff in all parts of Scotland are truly inspiring. I think it's important to set out why the Best Start report recommended this change, and therefore why we are moving forward with it. The report, based on expert clinical evidence, found that outcomes for the very smallest and sickest babies are best when they are cared for in neonatal intensive care units with, and this is a technical phrase, high volume throughput, and where there are co-located specialist services such as neonatal surgery. Put simply, clinical advice is that making this change will improve these tiny babies' chances of survival. Based on the number of these babies born in Scotland, 3 neonatal intensive care units would be the optimal model for Scotland. It's important to stress, if I can just come to the end of this section, Ms Bailey, it is important to stress that local neonatal units will continue to provide care to babies who need it, including a level of neonatal intensive care. This evidence is widely supported by a range of stakeholders and clinicians, including BLISS, that's been referenced before, the leading charity for babies born premature or sick, and now forms the basis of professional guidance published by the British Association for Perinatal Medicine, the professional body for neonatology, and a specialist society of the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health.
Jackie Bailey.
Thank you. The Best Start report recommendation was in fact 3 to 5 units. Why didn't you include Wishaw Neonatal? You could have easily done that because Lanarkshire is the 3rd biggest health board. You could have had 4. Why didn't you do that? That was the recommendation of experts.
Always through the chair. Minister.
I thank Jackie Bailey for her intervention, and I know that she's had conversations with the Cabinet Secretary in this area, and he has made it clear that the evidence that we had with the number of babies that require this intensive neonatal treatment, that 3 was the correct number. If I may, in this debate we are touching on babies who are the most sickest, the most vulnerable and need the most specialist of care. These babies will benefit mostly from clinicians who know that care, those who, through the frequency of babies they care for, have specialised in this care, those who have an additional layer of familiarity and expertise. Following the announcement in July 2023, we asked regional chief executives to plan for this national model to be implemented locally, with national monitoring of implementation being coordinated by the Scottish Government. We commissioned independent modelling work to fully map the capacity requirements across the system to support planning that was underway, and that report was published in May last year. Since the announcement of the new model, implementation groups have been established in each region with representation from each board, relevant clinical groups, partners and service users. Each group now has a regional implementation plan in place, which outlines local work both planned and underway to deliver the new model of care. If you just give me a second. Safety for the babies, families and staff is our utmost priority, which is why we have taken a phased approach to transition, allowing time to build the right levels of capacity in all areas, with NHS boards working towards full implementation by 2026.
Megan Gallagher.
I understand what the Minister is saying, and we're talking about how the implementation is going to be carried out, and there's lots of boards and various different people being appointed to positions to carry this out. But what parents need to know, if the Government continues with the downgrading of neonatal services and parents have to travel up to 3 hours to get to Aberdeen if that's where they need to go to, will there be a room for them to stay overnight with their babies so they can be close by should anything happen? Because if the answer is no, we shouldn't be going for the downgrade. However, I think the points that Jackie Bailey has raised in relation to the 3 or 5 model, again, we've got to ask the question, why wasn't Wishaw General, the award-winning neonatal department, not included?
Minister.
So I thank Megan Gallagher for her intervention, and as I said earlier, my office is very open. I would be very happy to have a conversation with you on this, because I absolutely realise how passionately you feel about this, and I think there are probably
Minister, we all need to speak through the chair. That
Sorry,
applies to a number of speakers already. Because otherwise you're referring
officer.
to me, and I don't think you necessarily want a conversation with me about this, but I don't know.
No, I don't know. My apologies, and I would never describe you as you, presiding officer. I'd be very happy to meet with Miss Gallagher, and I will come to the accommodation later on in my speech. Over the course of this year, we will continue to work with regional chief execs and NHS boards to continue to implement this service change. Implementation is already underway in the East region, with Fife babies transferring to Edinburgh, and in the West region with Ayrshire babies transferred to Glasgow. We've established a task and finish group made up of the regional chief executives, regional planners and lead clinicians to oversee and support a suite of national actions and coordination required for the delivery of each region's implementation plan. This includes further work on modelling the detailed impact on maternity services, and this will inform additional maternity capacity required, including for transfers, theatre, ultrasound and interventions. In order to progress the new model of neonatal care, we must do all that we can to ensure that the infrastructure, workforce and funding is in place to support and sustain the model. We are continuing to provide transitional funding to the boards hosting the neonatal intensive care units, as we've done for NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde and NHS Lothian since 2019, totalling £6.5 million, and with additional support for NHS Grampian now being included. This is in addition to the £25 million of support we've provided to all boards for implementation of the package of recommendations within Best Start. The change may mean that a small number of families will have to travel further to be with their baby. The Best Start report recommended that neonatal facilities should provide sufficient emergency overnight accommodation on the unit for parents with alternative overnight accommodation being made available nearby for parents of less critically ill babies. Considerable developments have been made to ensure mother and baby stay together and separation is minimised. All 3 of our neonatal intensive care units have accommodation available, both on the unit and nearby, to ensure that families can stay with their baby. In the Bliss report, looking at accommodation for parents of neonatal babies in the UK, it noted it is clear that more needs to be done to accommodate families, and we are considering their recommendations in relation to the Scottish findings. However, I was pleased that the Young Patient Family Fund, only available in Scotland, was recognised as providing valuable support to families with the costs of travel, food and accommodation. In addition, all 15 of our neonatal units are working towards implementation of the Bliss Baby Charter, providing neonatal units with actions and goals to develop a culture of partnership with parents. And I would like to thank all neonatal units who are committed. I've taken 2 interventions already, so I'd just like to continue to White. I'd like to thank all neonatal units who are committed to the Bliss Baby Charter and to Bliss for championing and supporting ongoing improvements to neonatal care. The changes the units are making to provide the best care possible for these babies and their families is extremely commendable. Our expectations remain clear that all women at all times receive high-quality, person-centred maternity care tailored to their needs, with quality and safety for mothers and babies central to decision-making. I would like to reassure members that whilst the decision has been made, we have created opportunities to listen to parents and families as we develop plans for implementation. And the Scottish Government, with the support of Health Improvement Scotland and Bliss, has consulted families via an online survey and focus groups. In closing, I would like to reiterate that I have listened to national clinical experts, to parents of babies in neonatal care and to maternity and neonatal staff across Scotland. I am assured that the move to the new model of neonatal care will deliver the best outcomes for those very smallest and very sickest babies. Presiding Officer, I would like to thank everyone who has taken time to speak with us. Their experience is and will continue to be invaluable as we take forward our work. Working collaboratively to plan, deliver and transform services is critical in delivering the best case for pregnant women, newborn babies, partners and families in Scotland. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. That concludes the debate and I close this meeting.